right. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Mondays with Mooch. Today, I have my good friend on here, Dutch. We're going to talk a little bit about how we met, and we'll get into some biker stuff. But you guys know, with Mondays with Mooch, when I started this out, I really wanted to tell my story. And one of the things I've been doing through the past episodes is having people intersect with my story, how we met, and how we shared our lifestyles together, how we came in each other's lives. So I'm really happy to introduce Dutch today. So, Dutch, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mooch. I think it's cool that a couple guys from technically the other side can find mutual ground and come together and be able to talk openly and transparently and debate with each other. I think it's a great experience.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited about it. We've talked a lot off air and we've become friends since I've been on your podcast. So I'm excited to kind of share some of that stuff. So for the viewers that don't know, I was on your podcast for the Mob Museum. And what's the name of it again?
It's Inside the Life with Giovanni and Dutch, and it's hosted at the Mod
Cool.
Museum.
Excellent. So yeah, I got a producer had reached out to me. It was a female, and she had asked me about being on the show. And so we, kind of talked back and forth, and she sent me a list of questions, and she sent me some links to the episode. But, I didn't do my homework and didn't look into it. And so I was like, cool, Mom Museum. So I get down there and I get set up and I walk into the back room or where we started, and I see you and Gio, and I'm looking like, man, where's this big biker guy look familiar from, man? You got tattoos all over. Gio kind of had this mob thing going. And as we're getting mic'd up, we're talking, and I was telling you about how I'd been invited to speak for this law enforcement conference that I turned down because I was talking about how, just because I'm not in a club doesn't mean my morals and values haven't changed. And you were being really respectful of that. We talked about that, and then he said, "Well, what made you decide to come on our show?" And I just go, you know. But the more we talked, the more I knew it was going to be a good show. Kind of what I don't know if you're in charge of guests or not, but what kind of came like why reached out to me or why reach out to me and kind of how was that process?
Yeah, so the Mod Museum hosts the platform, and they do pick out the guests. But Giovanni and I had taken turns influencing who we thought might be an interesting guest or who the audience would enjoy listening to. And a lot of our guests are members of organized crime or were associates or part of some kind of organized crime, namely the mafia or different families of the mafia. We also interviewed undercover FBI, DEA agents, basically anybody who had kind of worked in a covert capacity in the law enforcement side. We tried to kind of have a balance, and interview people from this side and that side because as the show's called Inside the Life, I think and like we're going to talk here today, I think our perspectives aren't that far apart really when we get down to it. But as far as you went, my experience working undercover, I had only worked on one mafia case, and that was with Giovanni, who introduced me to that. And that was an unfamiliar world to me, very different thing. That's truly organized crime. And I came
Yeah,
from
they were introducing you as a hitman, right?
yes, yep. Giovanni had infiltrated the Cavalcante crime family out of New Jersey. He was deep undercover in that case for a couple of years, and they tasked him with committing a couple of hits, and he brought me on as his hitman, and there's a lot of the
The
back.
biker hitman.
Yeah, of course, because that's what people, what you see, your imagination can tell you that's what you want. You know what I mean? And I know that people look at bikers as like big tough guys. They're definitely hitmen. They're definitely drug dealers. They're definitely organized crime. Which my opinion on that. We'll talk about that. But I actually asked for them to bring you on because I had been around the
Awesome.
bike lifestyle, and I knew that every audience is curious. There's such a fascination with the outlaw lifestyle, the motorcycle club lifestyle, and the undercover lifestyle, and they're not too far apart all the time.
Yeah, and as we were talking, we found out that we kind of had some overlap, right? Like, I knew a guy that was involved in an investigation you did, but I was in a club that you had done an investigation in, not at the same time, but we knew some of the same people from that. And then from where you live, you were around when I was doing a ride through there, and some stuff like that. So we had this kind of like interesting overlap from the beginning.
Yeah, and I was familiar with you because of the area I live in, and at the time you were the president of, I believe, the Illinois chapter of the Mongols, correct?
Yeah, I was the regional boss of Illinois, Missouri, and Tennessee, and whatever else, Indiana.
Well, I know
And
you
yeah,
did lots
so
of
so
ones,
yeah,
yeah. And I
Yeah.
remember you guys riding into town, like 150 bikes deep at least, probably, and it was quite a sight to see. It was very organized. It was a tight ride. It was pretty cool to see, actually. But I definitely remembered you, and I know about the incident that happened up on the strip that your club was part of, and so of course I was directly fascinated by the rest of the world would be interested in that as well.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about off air, but for the viewers that don't know, when I first started the Mongols in Oregon, there was like 5 of us, and so, man, if we had 6 to 8 guys in the pack, I was like, "This is the coolest thing ever," right? Like, felt like Vikings, and, when we rode through the Lake of the Ozarks bike rally, we had 180 bikes and like 215 members or something. And it was me and my twin brother leading the pack, which, we had started together. And it was like one of those moments for me, man, where I was just like, couldn't believe that it was even happening, right? Like, if anyone, you ride motorcycles and we'll talk about it here in a second, but, and anyone that ever sees a pack go by, they see 20 bikes, they think it's 100. So 180, like, I literally couldn't see the back of the pack. I had to have super plans ahead of time about where we're going to park, even. And, funny story about that too is, I'm not from that area, right? So, I did a couple dry runs, but I remember we were getting off the exit, we got a police helicopter above us, cops following us, and it said, my GPS was like, "Take the next turn," and if I did it that fast, you know how it is when you're in a pack, right? Like, if I slow down in the front, the guy in the back's jamming on his brakes, and so when it's that big, you have to be really cautious about how quick you move, and, so I ended up missing our missing our exit, and it was like a game of snake. Like, I had to take 4 lefts to come back around, and as I'm coming back, the pack was still getting off the freeway. It was wild, man.
Oh yeah, the
What was
strategy
it
that
like?
Cordy.
You heard and I think saw some of it, so what was it like on your end of it?
Oh yeah, I mean, for one thing, you could hear you guys coming from miles away because there was that like monotone echo of the bikes, and the changing of the RPMs, and then yeah, I mean, I have been around a few bike packs and I've ridden in formations and things like that, but I've never seen one that big, and it's amazing you guys were able to hold together as well as you did, to be honest with you, because I actually went through police motor school and we did a lot of motorcade stuff, and the way that we ride in a pack is pretty similar to the way that you guys ride in a pack, side by side, tire to tire, keeping that pace is critical. It's pretty impressive to see you guys all do that. You had some guys that could ride some bikes for sure.
Yeah, man, it was a trip. So, yeah, on that topic too, since we're just getting started, why don't you let the viewers know a little bit about, your history, like what got you into law enforcement and then what type of law enforcement you were doing and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a small town in Iowa, actually, a very small town no one's ever heard of. I had a good family upbringing for the most part. The family went through its issues and had broken times and everything, but I came up just a normal kid from a good background. I really didn't have any influence from any. I'd never known a single person that was a cop or in law enforcement my entire life. When I went on the department, I never knew anyone that was a cop. I had never been around it, but I was fascinated by the adrenaline of it all. And sometimes during my life, I saw some things happening, and when the police would show up, it would kind of calm the chaos down and kind of take away that little bit of fear that you have when there's no control around. And so I had respected them, but I also imagined that they had an adrenaline filled life, and that's what I wanted to chase. So I went into law enforcement in '96, started in a small town in Iowa, and I transitioned up to a larger metro. And ultimately, I went to work on a gang task force of the FBI where I worked full time undercover, infiltrating and investigating everything from white supremacist groups, a couple outlaw motorcycle clubs, terrorist organizations, drug cartels, street gang stuff, just a mass variety of putting myself inside different lifestyles, different cultures I had been exposed to. I did that for about 20 years and then I retired about 10 years ago now.
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to ask you, because I like to point out similarities of different groups and people that grow up in, a lot of people, whether they join the military or gangs or clubs or law enforcement, when you're young, well, a lot of times we're searching for identity, right? And so part of that I wanted to ask is like, did you grow up in like any sort of sports or was there any sort of like thing where you felt like attached to things or like had that community vibe?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course. I think that's a good point, Mooch. I played every sport. I boxed in high school. I played football through most of I played football through all my high school year, then a year that I was injured. I played baseball through my junior high years. I was involved in almost every athletic sports. I at least dipped my toe and tried a few of it. I'm terrible at basketball, it turns out. I wrestled from the time I was about 6 until I was 17, 18 years old. I was definitely involved in any kind of physical sport. I was drawn to that. Not only the competitiveness of it, just the toughness of it, the hard headedness of it.
Yeah, so I grew up wrestling too. I have an identical twin brother, and most of my family are school teachers and sports coaches. So young us played everything, right? Little League,
Mhm.
Pop Warner, but wrestling is what really stuck. And same thing, I was doing mat clubs through grade school, and then junior high school, and then I wrestled into high school, and then I kind of started messing around, and I didn't it didn't end up going to college. But one of the things I like to say on the podcast, and we've talked about too, is one of the reasons and for the viewers that don't know, I work with youth that are on parole probation. I'm a mental health therapist, and one of the things that I see nowadays, because, between funding and just everything's different, right? Budget cuts, that they take a lot of these programs out of these small rural schools and these pro social activities, how important they are to youth. And I know for me, I learned so many lessons, especially from wrestling, because if I got on the mat and I lost, it was generally my fault. Like I couldn't blame the quarterback, I couldn't blame somebody else. And a lot of the times it was because I wasn't training hard enough, or I was missing practice, or I wasn't taking things serious. Occasionally you get the person that was just straight up better than you, right? Which was also control of ego and all these things. And, but I also got this piece of we're traveling together. The points you score goes towards the team. So I got this individualistic vibe, but also the group vibe. Did you learn stuff like that from team sports, or what kind of things did you learn from sports that carried with you into adult life?
Yeah, for sure. And I like how you mentioned wrestling. And I said I boxed. I trained in boxing. I fought in the Golden Gloves. I didn't win in the Golden Gloves. I got TKO'd. I got my face smashed in. I got beat up pretty hard. But wrestling and independent sports, even though it's a team and there's at the end of the tournament or whatever it is, that there's a total score for the team. But to stand on a mat by yourself and go round and round with somebody and then take a loss in front of an audience is very humbling. And like you said, if you win, you learn to, the other guy's suffering because he's been punished, he's been beat, he's got to take the loss. So I think it's a really good exchange. I definitely learned that. As far as football, I definitely understood then that if I didn't do my part of the job, nothing would get done. Every single person on a team sport like that, the guy that runs the ball scores touchdowns. That's what everybody wants to be. But the guys don't block and the quarterback don't do his job, nothing gets done. So I think there was good lessons from both of them for sure.
Yeah, I bet that translates a lot to law enforcement, clubs, anything where you're working with other people, right? Like everyone has their strengths. You want to work towards those strengths. And I know too, like the grit of it. Like there's been times in wrestling or jujitsu where I'm just getting smashed, but you're not going to quit, right? You're looking at the clock. You're like, damn, I still have 2 minutes of this left. And that really resonated with me later on in life when I'm on a motorcycle ride and it's freezing cold, or I'm getting pouring down rain, or whatever. Maybe you're just tired, but there's no one that's going to come help you, right? There's no tap out. There's no like, hey, I'm just going to step out of this. And so that was something that like later on in life that I used to really look back on it and be like, wow, those are lessons I learned really early on with sports.
Yeah, what? That's a good perspective. I don't think I've given my sports time enough credit because, like you said, in the undercover world where I worked, there wasn't always a tap out available either. There wasn't a way to just check out. You don't just get to quit doing it. You
I
can't be
bet.
like timeout. I'm scared. I quit. I don't want to do this no more. There's not that option, right? So I'm sure I did pick a lot of that discipline up from sports and learned how to be tough and hang in there.
So tell us a little bit. I know you've been on a lot of other podcasts, and so I don't want to rehash a bunch, but tell us a little bit about like what got you into undercover work, and like you just kind of said too, the fear. I mean, the scary stuff that happens. Like, what was that like as far as like the adrenaline spikes and all those things?
Oh, I'm addicted to adrenaline, or I was at least. I mean, I couldn't get enough of it. The more propensity for violence, the more I wanted to do it, and I'm sure that resonates with the club guys too. I think even before the undercover life, when we're talking about those comparisons, I mean, there's something about putting on a uniform, right? Uh, and I imagine putting on a patch and wearing your cut and standing with your brothers and having that feeling of authority and respect that people move out of your way. That's a I don't think it's an unhealthy feeling as long as you control it and you control that ego. But I mean, putting on a uniform probably is similar to that, where I have my team. I have my backup. I have everybody with me, and that's a very comforting thing. Um, I worked as a uniformed police officer. Like I said, I went through motor school, did motor patrol for a little while, and I did the regular uniform police stuff. But uh, I'm tattooed, and I look the way I look because this is really who I am. I think getting high and tight, and pressing my pants, and shining my shoes was a way for me to get to this. I always had just fantasized. That's the only word I could come up with about working undercover because I think working on the street and seeing people's lives from only one side, I was like, I wonder what it's like when there's not a badge around. You know what I'm saying? Like when there's not a uniform around, everything's different. You know, people talk different, they walk different, they treat each other different, and I don't know. I was fascinated by it. I wanted to look in that window, and so when I got the opportunity to work undercover, I jumped on it, and it grew and grew and grew.
Yeah, the point you make about, the identity, right, or the wearing the uniform, I think that's inherently male like a male thing that most people like, whether it's a sport, which is why I brought it up. After high school, I really got involved in, like, the anti-racist skinhead scene, which had a specific look, right? Like, you had your uniform. And even probably similar to law enforcement is we had, a mission that we felt was, like socially justice, right? Like we're beating up neo-Nazis, we're beating up racists. So to us, we were like, hey, what we were doing, maybe it's legal, maybe it's not. I mean, most of it wasn't, but to us, we were doing the right thing, right? Like we thought we were doing the moral thing. And so I see those comparisons for sure. So when you're getting into undercover life and you're like learning different roles, so to speak, like what's it like seeing those other perspectives and like getting to know people from like something where from before all you have is like an idea.
Well, for me, Mooch, I'm not gonna lie. Like at first, I'm immature, right? And we have to learn things along the way. So at first, I looked at it as like a case, right? Just get the evidence, buy the drugs, buy the guns, do the thing. Not my
A good
problem.
guy versus bad guy,
Yeah,
right?
literally, it was kind of indoctrinated into me at that time, coming from a uniform position of being a street that we don't have time. When you're so busy on the street, you don't have time to really even. You're going call to call to call, and incident to incident to incident. And as much as we should be human about it, I think it's I think it's happens that we lose perspective and it just becomes a job. And it's like I never knew what happened to people I locked up. I never knew where they went. All I knew is they were gone, they were off the street, and my call was cleared, and that was that, and it seemed okay with me. Now working undercover, I started to realize these households were living in financial stress. A lot of parents, there's a dad missing, there's a mom missing, the siblings are split up. There's a lot of issues inside these households, which probably leads to some of the criminal activity. And I also realized that when the man of the house is generally for me, the kind of investigations I was working, it was men. They were the dominant person in the investigations. They're taken out of the household, and there was no contingency for that rent to be paid, for the food to be on the table, for gas in the car. And I started to kind of see from that side, being in the undercover world, being on the inside, that we're not that much different. I mean, I think good people are capable of very bad things, and bad people do good things. It's a matter of the scenario, you know. I hear people say all the time, like, I would do anything to feed my kids. I would kill to protect my kids. I would do this to protect my kids. And I'm like, now undercover, I look at it. Now, there's clearly some bad people that don't matter, like pedophiles and
Right, for
different
sure.
violent kind of offenders. I'm not talking about those obvious people. I'm talking about the ones that are just committing crimes that I guess maybe I would say are a little more socially acceptable. If you're making 18 bucks an hour and you're trying to pay the rent, you're trying to feed your kids, why is it so unreasonable to think that we would sell drugs or that we would participate in something that we consider to be a petty crime? I could see that side from the undercover world.
Yeah, and I've heard you talk about that on some other podcasts and stuff too, because here when you're undercover, I could imagine you're getting to know the families, right? You're there for the holidays and for the graduations and, you're the uncle, so to speak, depending on I mean, I guess I could be more specific, talk about motorcycle stuff because that's something I know. But I know the brotherhood of motorcycle clubs, right? So these are guys that are there for you no matter what. And so that had to be challenging, I'm sure. And we talked a little bit about kind of the toll that's had on you too. But when you talk about I really like how you talk about how a lot of people are capable of different things when they think it's what they have to do to provide, right? And we all know back in the day, what motorcycle clubs were doing. They found this new sense of power, right? They're a big group that, and they wanted to be outside of society. They didn't want to work. They wanted to ride motorcycles. So them getting involved in drug dealing and stuff, to me, that makes sense. I'm not saying I agree with it or that I don't, but it makes sense. But in this day and age, it's a little different, but with the economy and things paying the bills, like for me, what I saw is when there was undercovers in the Mongols, one of the ones I ran into, what he was doing is he'd find the guy that just got out of work and he'd be like, "Hey man, can you go drop this envelope off over here for me and I'll pay you X amount." And now that's an illegal activity, right? So like you were saying, like, yeah, we're not by the book, it's illegal, but does that make somebody criminal? And so how often did you see things like that?
That's a really fair question. And it's a good question. And that's the thing about working undercover is there's not a lot of guidance, not a lot of guidelines. I think law enforcement and legislation, the law is written in a specific way that is so broad that if if we're irresponsible, we could use it on a lot of people, because it doesn't take much to meet those qualifications, the elements of the crime. And to I don't know the whole scenario with that undercover and that guy that did, but I think when you're working undercover, you have to be careful with entrapment, right? Entrapment means, to me, an idea of entrapment is setting someone up, but it could be as simple as like, "Hey, do you have any guns?" "No, I don't have any guns." "Well, I've got $10,000. I'll buy one." Well, to me, that's a bait. That's an enticement. That's an
Yeah, I could
entrapment.
use $10,000,
Yeah.
right?
I don't know anything about guns, but I'll go get you a gun. You got 10 grand. I mean, I'll go get it. So to me, like, that can happen. And also, there's a lot of different techniques in the undercover world, and we don't all have the same, I guess, morality or like sense of like right and wrong and all that. Like, those are things I wasn't okay with, and other guys in that position have done it. And I know the kind you're talking about, where we kind of present a crime that's not even really happening, and we say, "Hey, guard this drug load," or, "Hey,
Yeah.
take this car and
That's a
drop
great
it
sorry
off."
sorry to cut you off, but that is a great example, and we talked a little bit. I don't remember if it was on air or off. I think it was on air, but it's an example I use often because I know it's a tactic, and again, I'm not trying to put you against other undercover agents. I'm not trying to put you in a bad spot, but we have talked about this before is, the street theater, so to speak, right? Where an undercover agent is selling either fake or confiscated drugs to another undercover agent, and they ask some members of the chapter they're with or the club they're with for protection, and then these guys get busted for, being armed in facilitation of a drug deal. And legally, so to speak, it doesn't constitute entrapment because why? Because they're inclined to maybe potentially like be involved in criminality. Like, how do you feel about that type of stuff? And I'm not asking if you did it or not, but like, how do you, in relation to what we're talking about, how does that fit in?
Yeah. Um, I did do it because I did have the right to say no to certain things, and I was careful to, for instance, a case I was working, there was a military member who was on a VA disability. I was doing drug deals with these other club guys, right? I'm buying meth from them, and that's a deal that's been set up. I'm not selling them meth. I'm not asking them to guard my load. It's a direct exchange from them to me, and they've chosen to do that. And I haven't asked them to do anything they're not doing. But one of the investigative agents had asked me, "Hey, this guy's a bad guy. His VA benefits have provided him liquid oxycontin." But because I was undercover and I had known this guy's life and seen where he come from, according to him, which I have no reason to disbelieve, he had been injured. He was a EOD guy doing explosives, setting a bridge. He broke his back. He got hurt. He came back. He got into a car wreck, and the VA was holding his benefits because they weren't sure if they were going to apply the car wreck as the method of his injury or his military service method of his injury. So he was going to the food pantry to feed his kid and doing what he could. I'm sure he could have worked harder and he could have been a better person, but I mean, he was doing what he could do. The case agent asked me to offer to buy his liquid oxycontin. And I said, no. I said, no, he didn't offer to sell it to me. I'm not going to offer to buy it because he's in a dire situation. If I offer to buy it and I'm trusted, he's going to sell it to me. He needs some money. I'm like, that didn't make sense in my morality. That didn't make sense in my investigative plan. So I left the guy out of it. And I guess maybe other members of law enforcement would debate and argue that's wrong, or maybe someone else would say it. But I tried to really just guide myself on, if you honestly know what's right and you honestly know what's wrong, you're probably right. And being undercover is
Right.
very intrusive. You know what I mean? You're very personal. So be careful how you walk, because they're not going to be locked up forever.
Yeah, and, one of the reasons I think that because after we did the episode with you, you invited me out for drinks, and I think it had it been any sort of other law enforcement, I would have questioned it, but you and I feel like resonated a lot with our own morals and values and for the exact reasons that you brought up. And we had a lot of good talk since then, and, um, one of the things I kinda wanted to discuss too is I know back in the day, there was this big narrative about law enfor or motorcycle clubs being, mafia on wheels and all this stuff, and, you know, uh, there's the good versus the bad, and before I was involved, or just people that watch TV and movies, I think they're under the impression that, there's the good guy and the bad guy, and the good guy goes undercover, and he starts seeing all the stuff the bad guy's doing, and he catches him for it, right? What was your experience with motorcycle clubs specifically? What was your experience getting involved with motorcycle clubs and the criminality that you saw?
Yeah. Um, First of all, like, I know what you're talking about there is like, is are motorcycle clubs organized crime? And I had been through training, and I had learned through an investigative side about outlaw, but they call them outlaw motorcycle gangs. I know it's a motorcycle club, and I've learned a lot. But anyway, there is some law enforcement has a theory that, that it's organized crime. Now, to me, organized crime means that everybody in the organization is working for the same thing, and it's generally to make money. And that means, say, the president of the chapter is telling everybody under him, like, this is what you do, this is how I make money, pay it back to me, pay it back to the club, do this, do this, do this. To me, that would be a version of organized crime. But my experience
Absolutely.
working undercover in the clubs that I worked with was that there were members that committed crimes because they chose to commit crimes. There were members of the club that were aware that they committed crimes. And there were members of the club that may have assisted them in committing the crimes, but sometimes merely because that brotherhood is so strong. Hey, man, I need some help. Are you doing something dirty? Yeah, but all I need to do is drive the car. I think it's hard for them to say no. But as far as motorcycle clubs being organized, in my experience, there wasn't a top to bottom organization. There was members doing crimes, and there was members that had knowledge of them doing crimes. But it didn't meet the criteria of organized to me because the national president wasn't aware of what the local chapter was doing. This chapter over here wasn't necessarily involved with what that chapter was doing. Now, there's probably cases where some of that is working, but maybe organized at a local level or a chapter level, but not at a national level that I ever experienced.
Yeah, and I like that you said from what you experienced because when I speak of this too, I only say from what I've experienced too, right? Like I don't know how other clubs run. I was in the Vagos for a short time, but within the Mongols, especially after 2008 Black Rain raids, we had a rule that everyone had a visible means of income, and no one was allowed to deal drugs. Now, don't get me wrong, there was always probably a guy or two that did it. I can't think of more than probably 3 or 4 that I know for sure did it. Because A, you'd get in trouble from the club if you admitted to it, right? So you're probably not gonna rope anyone in unless someone's close to you, right? I think the issue comes up with and you kind of touched on it too, is just there's that brotherhood piece, and it comes back to sense of morality. We see it in movies often, like you said, when it comes to being a father, what would you do to protect your kids? We see these movies where the guy goes, "Yeah, my brother is the guy that can call me at midnight, and I'll show up with the bat and the ski glove,"
Right.
without asking questions. And I think these things in those sense are socially acceptable. But I think when you join an outlaw motorcycle club, you're not so worried about what the law is, but does that make you a criminal? And I think those are the pieces that when I'm talking on these other podcasts, is that I bring up because I've had the opportunity to sell drugs, and I never have in my life because I don't wanna pay those consequences. To me, the quick money and whatever comes with it isn't worth the prison time. And so, joining the club kept me out of trouble because I know if I did something, it was gonna affect everybody else. But I do, we did talk too about, sometimes these dudes that are dealing drugs aren't really inherently drug dealers either, right? You brought up that gun thing, for example. You asked me for something, "Hey, man, I might be able to use the money." We're all working class people. I might be
Mhm.
able to use the money, and we all know a lot of people, right? So did you see I know it wasn't organized from the structure up, but did you see when you were undercover, was it a large percentage of people that were, like, actively out doing this illegal stuff, or is it more opportunist?
Yeah, to tell you the truth, like if we're talking specifically the club guys, with them specifically, a lot of them, they were so busy between whatever job they worked and the requirements of the club. I mean, live free. You guys got more rules than the rest of us sometimes. You know what I mean?
Absolutely,
You're riding
absolutely.
motorcycles, you're paying dues, you're going to church, you're answering the phone all the time. I'm like,
Yeah, it costs money to be in the club. That's
yeah,
one thing that people don't recognize. They think you make money, but you're spending all this money on gas and dues and national dues and going on runs and paying for hotels.
I
Like,
thought,
it
I
takes
thought,
a
it,
toll on cash.
I thought hanging out with those guys was going to be fun. Like I thought we were going to drink beer and ride motorcycles fast and just do gnarly every single day. But I was like, they're too busy. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's a time and a place for all of that lifestyle. Um, but I also could see like attraction, like when you finally make it work and you all come together and you put your cuts on and you line up and you ride out in formation, like that's a powerful feeling. I could see like how that would draw people in. Like you talked earlier about sports and club life, law enforcement, like that sense of identity. Like they're working, they're raising families, doing all the stuff they're doing, and then they get the opportunity to ride. They get the opportunity to be with their brothers. They get to do crazy, wild and be a man for a while. As far as a bunch of them being actively out doing illegal, not in my experience. You know what I mean? Like there was a lot more mean mugging and a lot more testosterone building than anything else. I didn't see active criminal engagement. In fact, a lot of club guys were very nice to the public. They treated the public with respect. They policed each other fairly well. You know, if someone was getting out of line, other members of the club would kind of check them and reel them in, did not draw attention to yourselves, or not give a bad image. So, I mean, it may not be the most popular law enforcement view, but no, as a whole, I didn't see a whole bunch of club guys committing all kinds of crimes. But I was dealing with what I call specific predicated people. You know what I mean? And so, unless you invited yourself into what I was doing, you probably weren't going to be there. And the guys that were part of the clubs that were doing things with me were actively participating in that already. You know, they weren't just brought in.
Right.
That
They
I
were part of, like, a larger investigation, or, like, if you were looking at, say, Aryan nations or some bigger
yeah
group, right?
yeah
And they ended up being parts a part of individuals were parts of that, and they happened to be in a club.
yeah. And I'll be honest with you, these guys that were in the club that are doing the crimes that I was dealing with, if they weren't in the club, they would have been doing the same crime. The club was
Right.
a benefit to them. The club was probably the one thing that kind of kept them a little focused and a little under control in a way, you know, kind of pulled them out of that. You know, like you said, I didn't see a lot of drug use. I mean, marijuana and weed and certain things, but like heavy drugs, I didn't see a lot of that being used because I was doing undercover drug deals. I saw it being exchanged, you know what I mean? But for the most part, it was just a normal drug investigation. It's happened to be members of this club.
So you talked earlier about, training and law enforcement training. With what you so I we've had some people on my other podcast, Patched, and we've talked about, in my opinion, how a lot of this law enforcement training is dated, based off old information. But, if you're in law enforcement and you're a new law enforcement officer and you're getting taught things or told things that you're gonna believe it, how do you feel how much in training influences how law enforcement perceive motorcycle clubs?
The training influences the law enforcement perception of motorcycle clubs greatly because normally that's their only exposure. And let's be honest, you guys aren't real coachable dudes. If a cop pulls you over and starts asking questions, they're not going to get answered, right?
Right.
Even if their only intent is like, what are you guys about? I have no doubt that every club's rule is you don't talk to the cops no matter what period, and that's it. You know, so their interaction, my experience with the training was that it was dated. It was based on a lot of like 70s Hell's Angel stuff and the booze fighter. I mean, the same stories kept coming
The
up and
Butch
coming up.
Crouch testimony back in the '70s and '80s,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, also though, that was fat beer belly guys just riding rigid hardtail shovel heads and dirty and wrenching around. And you look now and I'm like, guys are doing jujitsu, guys are doing weight training, guys are doing peptides, guys are wearing pressed jeans and nice cuts, and clean cut, and their bikes are nice and they're well taken care of, and there's a lot more pride in it. And I think that may indicate a change in the lifestyle on your guys' side too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, the culture has changed a ton, between the popularity and then obviously like we did discuss, and I don't think anyone could argue that at some point, 70s, 60s, 70s, maybe in the 80s, clubs were involved in illegal activity, and the generation was different. But man, if you joined a motorcycle club to be a criminal, I would think you're crazy because between all of the surveillance, between the fact that you're wearing a patch on your back, so you're highly visible. Like my argument always is, if you want to, in my opinion, if you want to be a successful drug dealer, you probably want to be low key. So
Yeah.
why the hell would you wear the patch on your back? And in fact, I had heard that there was, I had some friends who were firefighters, so they knew cops and all that stuff, and in a police academy, they were told that, hey, if you ever see like 6 or 8 Mongols going south on the freeway, they're probably transporting drugs. And I used to always think, well, if you want to believe that and you think that's fact, you have to admit that you're terrible at your job and you can't catch them, right? Or they're not doing it. But like it can't be, there's not really much of an in between. And you got to go out there and actually see it,
Yeah.
right? You got to see it for yourself. And I think that's the important piece is like, I'm sure, or I guess what I'll ask is, from what you were trained versus what you saw, what was your takeaway?
Yeah. Let's go right to that part about transporting the drugs on the bikes. I remember going to training and it'd be like, they talk about oil caps that have like a shotgun shell in them and you could slam them and it'd go off. Or like,
Yeah, I saw those were, gas or the throttle sleeve,
yeah,
right? Like they could shoot a shotgun out of the side of
yeah,
it or
yeah,
something.
yeah. And it was, I mean, honestly, it's not very realistic in my mind. And they had like the fishing string with the bag of Coke hanging in the gas tank or this or this or this. Uh, because I did do drug deals with specific predicated criminals who were a member of clubs. They never rode their motorcycle to a drug deal. It came in a Mercedes Benz like my other drug dealers did. It came in a truck or it came here, it came in a cooler, it came this way. There wasn't a pack of bikes with their cuts on riding around together. I mean, like you said, I mean, you guys know when you put your cuts on, you go driving around any city, anywhere, you're going to get hassled. The public
Yeah.
has fear of you. I think there's a little better image now with the public about fight clubs because you guys have gone a little above and beyond trying to be friendlier and more outgoing and
Yeah,
respectful.
leadership's
Yeah,
changed
and
and
that's
now,
helped.
yeah, for sure.
But the police still feel this necessity to stop you and identify you. I mean, they do. I don't know where. I mean, when you guys, the Mongols come to town or you guys announce a big ride, they bring SWAT teams and stuff in. You know, and I don't know where all of their information comes from. I think there's probably a lot of informants, a lot of associates that hang around the clubs that like to say they know some things and they tell the police, hey, this is happening and this club's beefing with this club. And if they come to town, you better be ready. So they kind of hype it up. And then you guys are fun to mess with. Like you don't submit real easily. It's a good show, right? The cops and the bad guys hanging out, they resisting each other. I think it's almost like a couple sports teams that are big rivals. We just got to go at each other. I think that's a mentality of law enforcement and bike clubs outside of my own perspective.
I agree. I think there is definitely that good guy bad. Like if you want to believe that narrative, then they're the bad guy and you're the good guy. And it's probably a lot harder to be like, hey, we're all real similar people, right?
Mhm.
And then treat them the way that some people do. You brought up something that I definitely wanted to touch on, is you were talking about informants. And I remember from Black Rain, they had, I think, three undercover ATF agents and then their wives, so six undercover agents, numerous informants. I mean, when I joined the Mongols in 2007, there was 2 members in the Oregon chapter that were both paid informants. And I knew nothing about informant life. Like, I was a punk rock kid that watched movies and read books. And so when I saw these guys doing, like, I had a no methamphetamine rule in my chapter and eventually in my regions, but I saw these guys doing meth and we were taking them to rehab. And I saw these guys, like, there was a club the law enforcement thought we might have issues with. And I was doing these sit downs with them, keeping it cordial. And that turns out now it was an informant that went up and punched them.
Mhm.
So I saw these guys as like, man, these guys were being criminals. And I was like, well, cops couldn't do that. So I was really naive to the role informants play in law enforcement. And so from what I saw is that these were guys that either had been arrested before and didn't want to do the time, or they were offered money to get paid. And so now it's a job, right? They're getting X amount of money to tell people to tell their handler that these guys are doing illegal stuff. So what role do informants play in investigations, or at least from what you've seen?
Informants are a necessary evil. I hate to say that from an investigative point of view. Um, Informants tend to do things They're motivated for different reasons, and you covered a couple of them. Normally, a lot of times, they've got themselves caught up in a case. First of all, let's identify what an informant is in my mind. Okay, an informant to me is someone who's working side by side, probably already involved in criminal activity with other counterparts or other other guys or people that are doing it. They're probably people that are close to him and people that they know, and they probably have been working together, doing crime together for a long time. The informant gets caught doing his crime on the side, and for some reason they decide that the other people have more to lose than they do. Well, he don't have a family, I do. Well, I
Yeah, the
shouldn't
victim
have to.
mentality,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I shouldn't have to do 20 years. I can't handle it. He can't. Um, that's one motivation to get themselves out of trouble. Now the
Or
problem
they would do it to me, right? Those are
is,
the ones I heard a
oh
lot. They
yeah,
would do it to
oh
me,
you would have
like you
flipped
said,
on me. Yeah,
I don't think too many people have come out that have been snitches or rats and been like, "Man, I'm a bad person." They justify it, right? Like,
yeah,
"Oh, man, that guy never called me on my birthday. That guy did this to me. Oh, he was gonna snitch on me next." Like, everyone has some sort of justification.
yeah. And interesting to that point. Club guys, mafia guys, Omerta brothers, never talk, never do. A lot of people do. A lot of
Yep,
people flip. It's
absolutely.
amazing. That part amazes me. Like I'm the cop. I'm the one everybody hates, and I'm thinking to myself like, I wouldn't do that. You
You're
know
like,
what I
"Shut
mean?
up, dude."
That's crazy. You know what I mean? I'm like, I mean, I don't think I could do that to my own people. You know what I'm saying? Like, never and never
Agreed,
and
yep.
never and always. But I guess for the most part, like, I couldn't be participating in that activity. And then when my time comes, like, I'm going to give you up. That was hard for me to understand. Other informants were paid. Not as many informants I dealt with were paid because, I mean, that's a slippery slope. Both sides are. But as far as
They have an
investigative,
incentive at that
yeah,
point, right? Or a major incentive at that point.
they have a major incentive either way. I'm trying to stay out of jail. I'm trying to make money. I don't. That's a tough one, right? But here's the problem: when you change the crime, now let's say it's terrorism. Are we going to save a bunch of people? Now is there value in paying that informant? Maybe, maybe it's morally more right. I don't know. The problem is we don't get to pick which crimes we use informants on, which ones we don't. And I
Right.
think the irresponsibility of law enforcement is when they take an informant and they don't do any due diligence. They don't establish credibility with this person. They don't get the details of this person. And they start committing crimes in order to bring other people into the crime so they can make the case and they can get the information to
They're
detective wants.
instigating, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I've seen a lot too, or I mean, I guess I can't say a lot, but I've seen often in court, if people don't take plea bargains, that the informants don't do well on the stand, right? Because when they
Right.
get when they get, cross-examined and their crimes come up or their motivation comes up, the jury's not really that into that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're generally not the most believable people, you know. Now, I do want to say there are times, right? There have been cases where a responsible case team has done their due diligence. They have a wonderful source who, for some reason, turns out great and is very credible and can even testify and be believable. And there's times you can use informants where there's never going to be any testimony. Simply, the staff's house is there, you know, or they keep the money here and they keep the dope there. The ones that were hard to work, and I think hard for all of us to understand, are the ones that were willing to betray these other people that they're close to in order to save themselves or get paid. And I have to question the morality of that. That's not somebody I want to be around, no matter which side I'm on.
Yeah, 'cause I'm sure you can imagine he would be doing it to you too, right? Like, one of the informants that was in Oregon, he got busted for selling motorcycle parts or stolen motorcycles before the Mongols started, and then when we started, he joined. So he already had this history of being in a motorcycle club. He already had this history of kinda being an outlaw, so to speak. He was a veteran but, he's getting paid to be this informant, which clearly I didn't know. And he's hitting me up saying, "Hey, I've got this stamp where I could change VIN numbers. We should steal these bikes." And then when we sell them, he goes, "We can put it in the treasury," which was already my first red flag. So it's like, oh, the whole group. But I also know as like I told you before, there was opportunities I could have sold drugs or stole bikes. First of all, motorcycle theft, I think there's zero money in it.
No,
And
none.
second of all, even if there is, for me, I would rather be poor and free
Yeah.
than be rich for a while and be in prison. And that, that's just my take on it because I wouldn't snitch on anybody. So this guy was instigating crimes, and then, eventually nothing really came out of it. I think he would tell about, who was in leadership and who was there. And because I was on non-association, I got busted a lot because of these guys. But nothing major came out because we weren't doing anything illegal. The federal informant, what I say, was real. He got close with a member. This guy had done 15 years in prison. He got out, joined the Mongols, prospected, passed, joined the Mongols, was doing really well. And the informant asked for a loan. And so he loaned him some money and he said, "Hey, I'm not comfortable like without this collateral. Just hold on to this pistol for me."
Uh,
And then he gets armed career criminal and he goes back for 15 more years. And so things like that are, obviously why I would probably obviously have my opinion on it. But this other informant, like I said, he didn't really do much. But then he reached out to me probably 6 months ago and was trying to tell me he's trying to write this book, and he's trying to act like he wasn't he was the victim, and he was like, I was trying to play both sides, essentially, because I got caught stealing, but I wanna let them know you weren't doing anything. And I think it resonates to your point is they're not trustworthy on law enforcement's end either when they're doing stuff like that.
right. I mean, I don't know. Somehow, I guess I justify the things that I did working undercover. It's very different than a snitch or informant or rat because I wasn't living among them, and I tried to really live my undercover life with the highest level of integrity because it's so intrusive and like I was very careful not to commit entrapment or not ask them to do something they weren't already doing. Like I my own opinion, give me a loan and hold my gun. That's entrapment. That's not
Yeah,
justifiable.
man,
That's total.
absolutely.
I
Carry
don't agree with
come
that.
back me up in this fake drug deal, like
That's not humane. And police are going through and they're being indicted now and they're being held accountable for things that they consider were mistakes and not criminal, whatever. And so I think we got to treat each other equally when it comes to the law. You know what I mean? Like, don't ask me to do something you're not willing to do. But one thing about informants and telling on each other, I think they don't turn. It seems like the criminals turn and flip and snitch faster than the cops do. They'll keep your mouth shut even tighter.
Yeah, and, like, so those 2 informants hated each other, which looking back is funny, right? I and I do agree with you, and I think maybe it's even a point of contention with some people where the thin blue line, and if law enforcement won't talk, you know, where's the morality in that too? And I
Right.
don't wanna get all into that, but I think that's a good point that you make. I think with motorcycle clubs, at least from what I've seen, 'cause obviously I think there's people have flipped from day one. You go back to George Way
Right.
Rogers and all the early Hells Angels. But I think in this modern era, we go back to this victim mentality, and we talked about it off air before, but back in my day, and definitely earlier, the guy that joined a motorcycle club already had a reputation. Everyone knew him, like, oh, he was the local tough guy or the local whatever, right? And nowadays, pretty much every club, and I get in hot water for this, but it's a fact, they'll take whoever's willing to do whatever it takes to join, whether it's
Mhm.
prospect or hang out for a bunch of time or whatever. And I think the majority of guys in clubs these days, be it social media and popular culture, Sons of Anarchy, they're playing a role. Like, they didn't
Right.
come from that lifestyle, so they don't understand the consequences, or they're not confident in who they are as people. And like we talked about, when I was in leadership, I made it a point that when we left bars, I wanted people to say, "I wouldn't with them, but they were great."
Yeah.
But these other guys, they're the ones that walk in there like, "Do you know who I am?" And they're puffy chested and they start the issues. Those are the dudes that I feel like get wrapped up in and then when they get caught, they don't wanna do the time, and then it's
Yeah.
somebody else's fault, or they have to tell on someone else. And for me, and George Christie talked about this on a podcast with, Jay Dobbins, where because he caught a lot of for having Jay Dobbins on, and he said, "To me, a rat's a guy that was living the life and told on people." And he goes, "And when it comes to undercover law enforcement, they had a job to do, and they caught people that are doing illegal stuff." And I love the overarching thought of that. Now we know that there's caveats to that, but I do agree to the extent of if you're doing illegal and someone catches you doing it, that's the game,
Yep.
right? But if you're not and someone's trying to instigate it or set you up, that's a different story.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Like entrapment is entrapment. There's no even debate to that. Like the crime has to be willingly and intentionally committed. You know what I mean? Like I loaned you money, hold this gun. I don't see an intent there. I think he was respectfully saying, okay, I don't want to make you. I'll hold the gun. Whatever. It's just a gun. It wasn't. I'm sure he didn't say, "Hi, I'm a convicted felon. Please hold my gun," or
Yeah.
"Hey, I use this in armed robberies and stuff. Please hold this gun." Like that would change things. I'm sure he's like, hey, hold my gun and I'll get it back when you need to get paid back. That's not criminal in my mind, but
I'm a therapist, right? So I like to think of mental health stuff and things like that. And when you're undercover, you did get to know, like I've heard you on some other podcasts, you did get to know the significant others and the children. And what role did that play on your mental health? Like after the raids or after the busts and
yeah.
people were getting locked up and like you said, these breadwinners were no longer there. What kind of toll did that take on you?
And I'm glad you asked that because I think people assume, okay, you got a motorcycle club full of mostly good people that are willing to commit some little teeny crimes here and there, right? And then there's a few people in that motorcycle club that, whether in a club or not, were always willingly and intently committing crimes anyway. Inside law enforcement, there's the same kind of thing. There's good guys and bad guys wearing badges. Some are like, I'll do this, but I won't do that. Others are like, I don't give a I'll do all of it. And some are like, I won't do none of it. And I think that's our similarity there. And then to your question, which was what?
The mental health effects it
Yeah,
was
of
of,
the
getting
family.
to know these people and their families, and then, the I know I could imagine, I guess I wouldn't know, but I can imagine when you're wrapped up in it, you're doing your job and you're getting everything done, but when it all settles and you see
Yeah.
the outcome, how do you deal with that, or how did you manage that?
And well, as I matured in my career and I saw people getting locked up, kind of like I said earlier, I see no contingency to pay the rent or feed the kids. I felt a lot of guilt. I still feel a lot of guilt. I mean, to be honest with you, people always know, like, did you take anybody's life? I'm like, man, I took a lot of lives. You going to prison for 20 years is dead in my mind. I mean, that's taking a life. And that should not be done lightly. And if it doesn't bother you that you did that, then I don't think you could be a good person. It bothered me. Of course, it bothered me. And seeing them with their families and seeing they're not always doing bad all the time. Sometimes they're playing with the kids. Sometimes they're snuggling with their wife and giving them kisses. Sometimes they're embracing each other like they're just human beings most of the time. So, yeah, I mean, I felt guilty about that. I still feel guilty about that. I've struggled with some of the like. I see the need to like lock up violent criminals that continue to repeat and repeat and repeat. I'm not sure that I can justify or understand how we could take a 19-year-old kid selling crack cocaine and lock him up for 20 years. I don't know. I could see the justice in that. You know what I mean? So I feel a lot of guilt for that, but I also can't be ashamed that there were certain criminals that were taken off the street that probably needed to be too. You know, they were very violent people or
Oh, absolutely.
contributed to large criminal enterprises that were impacting our society. You know what I mean? Like we do have to have a balance. And so I feel guilty and I feel bad for the ones that I think were not justly handled, but some of them were also right where they should be.
Yeah, and I definitely don't mean to, downplay the positive things that you've done and the people who've taken off the streets. I just wonder from a mental health perspective, whenever you're undercover, you're essentially playing a role as well, right? And you're getting really to these people are getting to know you, and especially I would assume in motorcycle clubs, you're saying "I love you" back and forth,
Yeah.
and so that's gotta be challenging, right?
Oh, no, it's a terrible feeling. It really is a terrible feeling. I mean, no disrespect to anybody that is part of my life that crossfires everybody, but my professional law enforcement side probably was less aware of me than the criminal side was because I was spending time with them and embracing them in a way that they trusted and believed. Like you said, it's a huge betrayal. I mean, there was times I thought, "Oh man, I hope he doesn't do this." You know what I mean? I hope this guy, I hope this guy walks away from this thing. You know what I mean? Because I saw a lot of good in him. Yeah, and then you take it home. I mean, I'm walking and talking and hanging out with these people. When I go home, I'm still wearing pressed Dickies and a pair of Vans and a white tee pressed, and I'm still walking and talking the street. It's hard to like wash it off, you know what I mean? And my kids are influenced by that, and I see the way their kids are being treated, the way my kids are growing up, and it doesn't seem much different all of a sudden. So yeah, there's a toll on that. There's a toll on that.
Yeah, we talked about it at the bar that night is that me and you were out and a lot of people kept coming up to us and talking to us
Yeah,
and you would ask me like, "Hey, is this like normal for you? Like, we look this certain way and all these people are coming up with talking to you, you know?" And I said, "Oh yeah, yeah, that's how I'm always smiling and talking to people." And we kind of talked about the role people perceive you versus the role you are at home. What was that like? I mean, I guess you touched on it a little bit, but like when you were playing a role, especially as a biker, because
yeah.
we didn't get super into it, but you ride motorcycles. You've always ridden obviously, you were a motorcycle cop when you first started.
Yep.
So, how much of it was, really you and how much of it was the role?
Yeah. I think, for me, my personal perspective was that my role had to be as close to my real true self identity because you can't keep up otherwise. Everybody's met somebody like, man, that guy's, he's
Oh,
he's
yeah.
not making any sense. That is, so I kept most all of my lifestyle that I portrayed myself as, it was part of me. You know what I mean? I think if I'd have been a financial advisor, I would have rolled up to the bike club and done dope deals in a Range Rover. But I grew up poor. I grew up on the street. I grew up around bike club guys, and I admired them. I used to fantasize like I want to be in a bike club. I mean, I traded a KX 250 for 76 FLH when I was like 16. So
Nice.
I was fascinated by it, you know what I mean? I was fascinated
Yeah, you've
by
been riding a long time.
Yeah, I was fascinated by all of that part of it for sure. But my identity inside the club, I didn't really have to fake or inside of any investigations. I mean, I wore different clothes and I flashed little cash and I got to be a baller even though I was only making 70 grand a year. I wasn't no baller at all, but on the street I was a baller. But the
Right.
rest of it I kept pretty close to my true identity. I tried to stay true to myself because it's just easier to keep your story straight.
And, there's some questions I wanna ask that I think I'll save for Patch as far as, like, the effects it had on your family life, because I wanna show some more of these similarities, right? Like,
Yeah.
when you're active in the club, you're away from your home all the time. I'm sure
Yep.
it's exactly the same for you.
Yep.
Um, but one thing I do wanna ask is, for similarity purposes as well, is you left that life, like, you retired and you're back to home. What was that like for your identity, right? Because here you were this undercover agent, a biker, and now you're out. What was that like for your identity when you had to say goodbye to everything? And did
Yeah.
your friends that were involved in law enforcement, do they still stay in touch? They'll still talk to you? Like, what was that like?
That's a great question. So, first of all, part of the identity in law enforcement is you always have a gun and you always have a badge. And that is very protective. I mean, that can get you out of a lot of get you in and out about anywhere you want to be. It's a pretty powerful thing to have, right? Also, your friends are cops. You hang around cops. They're your buddies and everything. And I'm not gonna. I saw some pretty violent things. I saw some pretty bad things. I was definitely experienced some things that would probably mess a lot of people up. But I don't complain about having PTSD. Not that people don't have it. I mean, it definitely affected me. And when I left, I chose to not carry a gun anymore. I just put it away. Badges went into some storage container. I don't even know where they're at anymore. And I disappeared for about 2 years. I just felt my phone. I just walked away. It wasn't that I didn't want to be around my friends or anything. I just wanted to leave the lifestyle behind. And the short term before I left, what I found is when I left, you're just gone. There's nothing wrong with them. They didn't mistreat me. It's just when you're out, you're out. You're no longer a part of
Yeah.
it. And there is a struggle with that identity. Like, what's my purpose now? What do I become? What do I do now? And it took me probably a year or two to like kind of find confidence in just me, the new me. You know what I mean? So yeah, that separation was tough. I'm sure leaving a club's similar to that too.
Man, almost identical. And, as we get older, we're able to reflect a little bit more, right? But I remember I'm sure it's the same in law enforcement to some extent, but, like, when I'm in the club, I had these blinders on that I didn't realize, and I was all in, and if somebody left the club, even if it was for good reasons, part of me was just like, "F them," right?
Yeah.
They left me, and
Yeah.
and so when people say they talk about, "Oh, there's so much brotherhood when you leave, where's the brotherhood?" I understand both sides of it because, hey, when you're active and you're in these high risk situations, like I'm sure you were in law enforcement, and then this other guy's now gone, maybe they didn't forget about you, but they're not even really thinking about you, right? They
Yeah.
have to be thinking about what's going on and what's in front of them. But that other piece is, this for you spent all these years of your life like, "Hey, this was me. I was Mongol Mooch," and,
Yeah.
and then now you're gone, and I feel like both of us we've talked before too, so I know this is true, but both of us are the same person with or without it. Like, we both still ride our motorcycles and, still have tattoos and,
Hmm.
dress a certain way, but we've also changed in a way, and I feel like I really resonate with the part where you said where I didn't stay in you chose not to stay in touch
Right.
because when I left the club in good standings, I covered my tattoos and it caused a lot of issues. But for me, I was like, I don't want to represent something I'm no longer in. And it wasn't out of disrespect. In fact, it was out of respect.
Yep.
But one of the things when I got put out in bad standings, what ended up benefiting me is I didn't have a foot in and a foot out anymore. I was able to just move on, and it does take a long time to reestablish your identity, or maybe not identity, but more like your purpose. Like, what? Okay, so before my purpose was to lock up bad guys, or my purpose was, I was leading these guys, and then what do we do now? So I really like show, and we could talk more about that on Patch because I really like that thread. But I think it really shows those similarities, and another thing we talked about too is I think these personalities are so similar, right? Like, I feel like had you been in a motorcycle club, you likely would have worked your way up into leadership. I feel like some of my friends that are in the special forces in the military, if the same thing and vice
Yep.
versa, and or any of those guys became law enforcement, they likely would have wanted the thrill and the
Yep.
adventure and and the adrenaline that comes with undercover work. So there's got to be these moments where any one of us could have taken it, made one or two
Oh,
different choices, and ended up on a different path. Because I feel like one of the main reasons I wanna have it on the show was for that reason, because I feel like we all have so much in common, or not
yeah.
we all, but guys like us have so much in
Yeah.
common.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, look, right or wrong, I love fighting, right? I can justify it because I was on the job. If someone resisted, we got to fight. It's fun. You guys beat each other up and stuff, and there's a purpose for it. But also, we're just it's fun. We grew up wrestling. We grew up beating on each other. Me and my brother beat the crap out of each other, like probably daily. Like
Right.
it's just to me, it's just part of like our masculinity. Like we're very similar type of people. We like to go fast and chase adrenaline and fight and have camaraderie and all the same things. I remember guys getting busted and they'd find out I was undercover and I'd be sitting there talking to them that, man, I bet I would have been a good undercover. I should have done that. You know what I mean? And I'm like, you would have been. I probably would have been a good outlaw. Like we could have just switched seats at different points in our life and went the other direction, and both of us been successful. I'm sure of that.
Yeah, and I would argue that you wouldn't have been successful in your undercover role if that wasn't true, right? Like,
Right.
you wouldn't have been able you wouldn't have been able to be a believable or a biker if that wasn't part of your personality to some extent, right?
Right. Right. When I talk to other people that are going into the cover, I try to tell them like, look, man, just be yourself. I'm sure when you got a new guy coming in the club and he's nervous and he's anxious and he wants to fit in no matter what, I guarantee without you, you'd probably say, hey, man, just be yourself. We'll
To
like
this
you as you
day,
are.
man, nothing turns me off more in meeting new people when they start trying to tell you their tough guy stories, or, like, first of all, I don't care what side you're on, yours, mine, any of them. We all know people have lived through certain things, and you telling me your tough guy story does not impress me whatsoever. But also, some of the people I think are the coolest are the ones that are comfortable being the nerdy guy, or the funny guy, or whatever, just being their genuine self, and that goes a way longer way with me than any of this fake bravado tough guy. So I'm sure it's the same, right?
Yeah, I think when I was younger and more mature, I kind of chased that recognition. I wanted to be known
Yeah,
as
ab
like,
oh, absolutely.
I'm this. But like you said, as I matured, I guess maybe if you've done enough tough stuff, then you don't have to prove it no more. Maybe and you get it. You finally get your ego in check, and you're like, hey man, I don't need it. I don't have to prove it to you. I don't have to copy about it. I've lived it. I've done it, and that's where it stays. You know what I mean?
I think there's 2 good points in that. One, I'll often say, and this is easier said than done, but, someone back in the day, if someone called me a pussy, I always say, use the exaggeration that I'd drive a state away and beat their ass. Adult me realizes that they would still call me a pussy, things, whatever, and I'm only risking getting in trouble or being taken off the streets. But nowadays, like, and I'm not saying everything tough, but I know who I am and what I'm
Yeah,
capable of, and I just don't care if other people realize it or not. And I think that comes with this maturity, but it also comes from life experience.
definitely.
And I think the other piece to that is there's so many people that haven't grown up around violence that don't know what it really can turn into, or don't know what it's really like. And so they see a guy at a bar and they want to stare or smack him. And guys from that have gone through stuff like us know how quickly things can go to a stabbing or a shooting, or whatever, but how quickly it could be a life-changing moment, just not smack in the face. And if you don't have that experience, you're naive to these things.
Our egos get us in trouble a lot. I mean, like you said, you're willing to do a certain thing. I've chosen to fight, and I'm willing to fight. What I didn't realize is when I did that double leg and his head hit the back of the curb, it was going to turn into murder, right? And there's a
Right.
consequence for that. One, you killed somebody, and you're probably going to be indicted. But I mean, like you said, violent things are have a serious consequence. Like it sucks to hurt people. I mean, I've stepped back from a fight or two and been like, man, I feel terrible for that. You know, like it's not a good feeling. I mean, you're just doing what you have to do. It's animalistic, and then when it's over, you gotta take that in and you gotta absorb it. Be like, I did that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you knew how bad it could get, and I think
Yeah,
that's kind of what I'm getting at is, like, a lot of these people that haven't and maybe not these people, but people in general that wanna have this tough guy image, but they haven't lived that life, they don't know how it could be, like, for me nowadays, young me wouldn't take much for me if I've been drinking to smack somebody, right?
right.
Feel disrespected or
Yep.
whatever. If I and it's been years and years and years since I've had to, but the reason is because in my mind, I'm thinking, "Okay, if I hit this guy, what's he gonna do? If he pulls out a gun, am I prepared to take it to that level?" And then or, "Hey, if everyone does that now, right? So if I hit him, I'm gonna make sure he doesn't get up. Is this worth it?" Right? Is this worth the level it can go to? But if you don't have those experiences or those thoughts, it's a lot easier just to make the action, I guess.
I can also say rolling around in a mat, training in a controlled environment, hitting each other is one thing, but a bare fist to the nose or the mouth is very, very real, very fast. You know, the flashing, the heat, the loss of what's happening. Like it's yeah,
Oh, that white flash when you get
yeah,
hit hard enough?
yeah.
Yeah,
With
man,
the
I know
one when
exactly what
when
you're
you're like,
talking
oh
about.
wait, this ain't a bar fight. This is a real fight. Someone knows what they're doing. You know, I'm in trouble.
There is nothing worse, and unless you've been in street fights, or whatever, that where especially if it's just you and another person, and there's no witnesses around or whatever, and you all of a sudden you throw one punch and you get hit 3 times, or you see that flash,
Yeah,
and you're like, okay, well, here we are, and
yeah,
there's no, and it goes back to that piece we talked about. There's just having to suck it up and get your way out of it,
yeah.
but not a lot of people know that fear, right? And
Right.
I'll admit it's fear, like that I could die here today, right?
Yeah,
Or at very least, there's no false belief that, "Oh, I'm gonna beat this guy up." We pretty quickly in a fight, you can decide you can figure out who's gonna win, and when you're the guy that's not, and if your homies aren't there or someone's not
yeah.
gonna
Right.
break it up,
That,
there's no feeling you can't really describe that feeling unless you've lived it.
a fight too, especially on a street fight like that, there becomes a mob mentality. People get involved in that fight that shouldn't be involved in that fight. I mean, you think you're taking care of business and doing what you're justified, you believe is right, and you're doing your thing, and you get a fist to the ear hole and one to the back of the head, and you realize there's three other people that don't care what team you're on. You know, I mean, it can change quickly, like you
Yeah.
said. It could get real
At
bad.
least 3 times, it was my twin brother, the one that was hitting me saying, "Oh, I thought you were the other guy."
Yeah, yeah, that happened too.
I remember, there was a time in San Diego, we were at a Maxim magazine party, and I was in the Mongols, and we had a support group called the Wrecking Crews. They're all younger guys, and I was trying to impress them, and some dude's running his mouth to the Wrecking Crew guy, and I'm like, "Alright, I'm gonna show them what time it is." So I hit this dude without paying attention to anything, didn't look around and see how many friends he had, and I got a good shot off, but as soon as I hit him, his buddy hit me so hard, I saw a flash of white, and I just turned around and walked off. I was like, "Welp,
That's over.
okay, I hit a guy hit me, I don't want any more
Yep.
of this," and I
Yeah.
left, and all the youngsters were like, "What the hell did Mooch just do?" And I was like, "Welp, I learned I didn't want any more of that. That's
Yep.
what I learned."
Yeah. Yep. That's a good example. Walk away because that was
Well,
gonna end
Dutch, I
bad.
loved having you on the show, man. I
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of stuff we could talk about. I'd love to have you back on Patch and talk more about the mental health stuff and, similarities, but thank you so much,
Yeah.
for spending your time with us today. Is there anything you wanna plug? Any, things you're like, any projects you got going on or anything like that?
No, no, I'm good, man. I appreciate that opportunity, but no, nothing I need to plug, and I really appreciate you having the transparency and that you and I have developed what I consider to be a friendship, and we can talk about these differences. I think it's good for other people to hear us come together and be able to talk openly about our sides. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, and without us being open, then how could people be believable? And, I started this episode off by saying you're a friend of mine, and you definitely are, and if people wanna give me shit for it, it is what it is, here we are. So, thank
Cool.
you so much for coming on. I appreciate you, brother, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Mooch. Later, man.